Hello, welcome again to Freethought Forum. Freethought Forum is a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Jonas Holdeman.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. Welcome to our program. We want you to know if you don't believe in God, or if you do, you shouldn't be alone. And we want to welcome you to this program. Here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking individuals and groups and atheists and agnostics and others. And this is a show for those, all of those people who would be willing to have a good, open discussion with us, committed to life rooted in science and rationality and free of supernaturalism.
And today's show topic deals with an anthropomorphic view of the deity, of deities, because it's a very common kind of thing. But first, we want you to tell you a little about, that's your line.
Well, yeah, it's my line.
That's your line.
Our sponsors of our program are the Atheist Society of Knoxville, and they have a group of fun meeting at the bar or eatery, and the meeting at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30 today. And look for the silver jacket with a book there called The God Delusion, standing up. And then everyone is welcome to the happy hour. They have drink and food and conversation. Just don't proselytize or punch or provoke, but good open discussion.
Okay, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of each month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday, we hold a book club discussion, and the fourth Sunday, there's usually a get-together we call Reflections meeting. Features a potluck in someone's home. But recently it's been alternating with a game day.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of just for social interaction.
Yeah. And later in the show, we'll give you our website to visit for additional details, such as times and locations. And, of course, you can see our number on the screen. And so, do you have anything in the news? I don't.
Oh, I was just going to ask.
We got a lot of material. There's a lot in the news, but we got a lot of material to cover, too.
Okay, Joe.
So let's plunge into the topic of anthropomorphism. That's a mouthful. It's just two words, two Greek words, anthropos, meaning human or human-like, and morphe, meaning form. So pictures in the Greek literature, ancient Greek literature, their gods seemed awful human. And then you read the Hebrew Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament, but it's the Hebrew Bible, and it's highly anthropomorphic. The deity walks in the garden, and he says, "Where are you, Adam and Eve?" And I take it that's a rhetorical question, but it sounds like he's looking for them.
But beyond just the morphism part, there are also they have some of the characteristics of human beings. Anger, joy,
grief,
sorrow,
you find all the human emotions are projected onto the deity, and so that he's awfully human-like, or I say he because in the Hebrew tradition they use the word she to refer to the deity. It's always the he.
But even in the Greek tradition, I mean, there were female gods.
Oh yeah.
But of course, the chief god remained male.
Yeah. Also, in the Hebrew tradition, come to think of it, later on in the writings, you have a character which is called wisdom, and in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, it's Sophia. And that's a companion with God, and God cannot create except through wisdom, with the cooperation of wisdom. And you can see the logic of what they're thinking. I'm a humanist, and you are too, I know. We're trying to see the human side of human beings, trying to solve their problems before science. And so they were trying to say, well, even if there is a God, he's got to have logic and wisdom. And the universe couldn't just come into being without some structure and order, and that's what they were trying to struggle with.
Yeah, I think in the Greek tradition, I guess I don't remember how the universe came into being, but there were first the gods, and then the heroes, and then humans, and the gods didn't necessarily were not the source of everyday activities, everything that was happening. If a storm occurred, well, Neptune might have a stomachache or something.
Yeah, out there on the ocean.
or in conflict with one of the other gods.
Yeah. Now, in all fairness to the Greeks, they had their philosophers, and that's just philos and sophia, love of wisdom. And you had people like Heraclitus, who was up there in Ephesus, and he is saying that the universe is in flux according to logos, from which we get our word logic. But I think he meant there's a flux or a process, but it has structure to it. And they were trying to think, yeah, you've got an order. In fact, the Greek word for world is cosmos, which is over against chaos. So you can see how they were trying to make sense of their world long before Kepler or Galileo. So we need to be more sympathetic and not arrogant toward these people. They were struggling the way we do.
Yeah, I wonder if the characterization of the Greeks and Romans as being polytheistic and having all of these different gods to the exclusion of some of the ideas like you just mentioned is a reflection of the kind of Christian viewpoint that focuses on the unity of their of their God and the superiority
well, actually, the early Hebrews were struggling with this too. Their gods early, they came out of the Canaanite tradition, and Amalekites and all the others, all those tribals, and they were putting together, trying to make sense. And they're all inherited an incredibly anthropomorphic worldview. Their gods were very human-like. And we have there in the 6th chapter of Genesis, which we mentioned much earlier. In fact, I've got a particular translation I want to read here. And it goes something like this. When mankind had spread all over the world and girls were being born, some of the heavenly beings saw these girls were beautiful, so they took the ones they liked. Now, this is a particular Good News Bible Old Testament translation.
I noticed the quite a bit of difference between that and more traditional.
Well, much of the what we call the Old Testament seems to have narrative stories, ancient stories, and then later on redactors and editors reworked some of them into very sophisticated poetry. But you can see the weaving together. It's an artwork. And here you have some of the old stories of, here is translated heavenly beings. In most translation, they're called sons of God, you see. And then they looked upon these beautiful girls, that translated here, young women, and they wanted to copulate with them is what they really mean. And what they're trying to explain in this pre-scientific world, anthropomorphic world, is they apparently had around guys who were big, tall, and we do a few now and then. We'd put them on basketball teams, and they called them giants, and they had stories of giants. And they were trying to explain this before they had any sophisticated genetic theories. And so they're trying to explain that there were these heavenly beings who came down and copulated with human beings, and the product was giants. And that's how they explained. So that all religions are cultural developments trying to do several things. One is to explain their environment and themselves, and then to try to develop some kind of moral codes so they can live together without killing each other off and, have trades and barter.
Yeah, of course, people, we believe that people of that age were of small stature, so that we would, today, would almost be giants compared to them.
Yeah. And apparently they had encountered people from a different culture, and every now and then, and we all do this today. The other day I saw one on TV. This guy's 7 foot tall. And how do you explain that? Well, now we have a scientific approach to these things, but they didn't. And we can be sympathetic and say, well, they're just trying to find a way to deal with it in their highly anthropomorphic world. And still they had to make a living and survive and try to explain. And we have, for example, the story of Noah. You remember that story? God looking down on the earth, and what does he discover? You remember that? He's pretty fed up with wicked mankind has become wicked. Well, you got a passage there in Genesis, don't you? Or no, you got the one in Mark. I've got the one in Genesis.
I was just reading from the English, from the Oxford Study Bible, that God was very much disturbed by what he saw, and it says that he figured he made a mistake.
Well, it says in the King James translation, and it actually uses the word repented. He repented that he had made mankind.
Oh, the English Bible says regretted.
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 And another translation has apparently the Catholic influences, he grieved that. And one of them used, you remember, bitterly, resented that he had made mankind. Now, we've got a phone call already. You'll press a button there.
Okay, Joe, here we go.
Go ahead.
Hello, caller.
Tell us our name and go ahead.
This is Al.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say about the sons of God.
Yeah, you think it's Seth, right?
Yeah, well, the sons of God happen to be the line of Seth.
Okay. Now,
the sons of God were men that were from the line of Seth, a bloodline that believed in God as a triune being, and they saw the Canaanite daughters and these ungodly daughters, and they started to cohabitate with them, and that's why God cursed all that.
Well, Al, why do you suppose the Bible refers to them as sons of God and implies that they were deities? Some refer to as fallen angels.
It doesn't imply they're deities. John 1:12 says, as many as received him, that's Christ, to them become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. I'm a son of God because I believe in Christ.
But I think the concept was quite different back in Genesis.
No, it's still the same. They believed in a cross to come, and we believe in a cross that was.
Now, by the way, you're leaping ahead about how many hundreds of years?
Well, there's a 3,000, 4,000 year period here.
Exactly. I wanted you to say it. You're leaping ahead thousands of years to interpret this passage. The advantage we have, Al, is we're taking the text in its local context, not leaping 1,000 years ahead to bootleg in your particular version.
No, I'm showing you what the sons of God. When it says sons of God, I'm a son of God, just like they were sons of God by believing in the Trinity.
Let me ask you this.
And a cross to come.
Whenever it
and the
says
God of
that,
creation.
whenever it said they were looking upon the sons of human beings, that would already presuppose if they were sons of Seth. By the way, where does it mention Seth?
Well, if you follow the line, if you follow the lineage from Genesis all the way to Seth, you'll find out it's a godly line.
How'd you discover that?
It starts with Abel before he was killed.
Is Seth the son of Adam?
Yes, it was the son of Adam.
On your own theory, he was born in sin, right?
He was born in sin, but also he was born believing in God, the Creator.
Let me ask you, he was born believing that?
Yeah.
How'd you discover that? Were you there?
No, I wasn't there, but I followed the line of Seth. It's a bloodline that believed in that God.
Now we have the Gospel according to Al. Okay, Al.
You've got 6 different Bibles there, and there's only one Bible. That's the King James.
Okay. Well, Al, we've got your opinion on this. I want to thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
Actually, the King James came about hundreds of years after the Bible. Actually, it came out probably about 1611. The New Testament probably closed somewhere around, maybe the 1st century or a little after the 1st century in terms of the last thing written. Depends on how you interpret that.
So we're talking about 1,500 years later.
Yeah, and what Al's quoting is 1,000, at least 1,500, at least 1,000 years later, or even more. 1611 is when he came out, along with Hamlet, about the same time with Shakespeare. So Hal gave us his interpretation, but it's an interpretation. We have a different interpretation, and I think ours is much more in keeping with the text itself, and that's why this translation here is in keeping with our interpretation, and the other ones call them sons of God, not Seth. It's quite clear. Al bootlegs in from a passage 1,000 years later, but we don't have time to do that. We got to get back to the text here, not this wild speculation. Now, let's go on to this anthropomorphism. The reason we're emphasizing this, there's a passage in the early part of Genesis where the notion that God creates human beings, male and female, created he them in his own image, which kind of
which image?
Which would indicate, if you took it seriously, then God is both male and female. You see, so why they would use the word he all the time is another big question.
Well, I mean, the depictions of God are male, and so what is the function of being a male if there's only one God?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, okay. What we're trying to say here is that these ancient people, like ourselves, were doing their best to try to explain their world, and they had a lot to do, just as we do too. I mean, there are millions and maybe billions of galaxies. I mean, one estimations there's a 500 billion of galaxies. Now, that's beyond my imagination.
Yeah,
I can talk it, but it's hard to imagine.
The whole concept of revolving around a small area in the Middle East, which is small compared to the immensity of the Earth, which is small compared to the immensity of the galaxy and the universe. Well, it's so insignificant.
Well, at that time, I think, Jonas, you know as well as I, they held to a kind of a 3-story universe. I mean, when Jesus, even in the 1st century, the book of Acts, toward the end of the 1st century, A.D., you have Jesus going up into heaven. Even as a kid, I kept wondering, you know, that I'd learned that, you know, it's not exactly up, it's just out. So that has to be figurative speech. So you got to start translating into what's literal and what's figurative, which is what you do with poetry and trying to find out what's literal. But we want to get into also the fact that we don't have the original texts of the Bible. They just don't exist. In fact, it's highly unlikely that anyone ever saw all the original texts of the Old Testament. It's highly unlikely. You have so many parts of it that simply perish, and you have copies of copies of copies of copies. And now we have many, many copies after they were put together, but it's still, even before then, we've got fragments. And for example, in Mark 16, which you have there, is a passage in the King James. Would you read the King James?
Mark
16 over there on the right-hand side, I think.
Okay. Okay, it says, and he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel.
Go ahead.
Okay, preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. These
signs, go ahead.
These signs, these are the signs of a Christian who believes. In my name shall they cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So how many of those who proclaim to be Christians, I would ask Joe, can lay their hands on someone and heal them, or can drink deadly poison? We have those who try it, but not often for long.
Well, now, what's interesting to me is now I've got the Revised Standard Version. There are many other translations. That's the King James. That passage is not in the Revised Standard Version of the Bible.
Oh, really?
Except as a footnote.
Okay.
Most translations know that that's not in the better manuscripts. Now, the one Pentecostal group, the ones that like to do snake handling, they like it. But that's not in the better translations. We've got another caller. Go ahead, caller. Let's hear what you have to say.
Well, hey there. This is Faithless Forrest. Sorry I can't be with you guys today.
Yeah, speak up good and loud.
This is Faithless Forrest. Sorry I can't be with you guys today.
Okay.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes,
Sure
thank you.
can, yeah.
Faithless.
All righty, great. Well, so I've been listening to the show, and it's made me have a couple of short comments. Earlier, Joe was talking about how we maybe need to be sympathetic to the worldview of people who went before us because, there was genuine ignorance there, and that they were trying their best to make sense of the world around them. At least we hope they were trying their best. And I heard something about the ancient Greek view about how the Earth-centered universe worked that made me a little more sympathetic to that idea. They had this idea that things that were heavenly moved eternally, where things on earth came to rest, that there was this distinction between heaven and earth that way, and that things that were heavenly were perfect. But when you look up at the moon, you don't see something that's like a perfect, a round thing. It's got blotches on it. So have you ever thought, what did they think about those blotches on the moon if it was supposed to be heavenly? There's an interesting explanation or assertion I've heard. Have you, Joe, or you, Jonas, you ever heard what some of the ancient Greeks used to explain the blotchiness of the moon?
Well, what did you say you had heard?
Well, I was asking if you guys have heard anything. I'll go ahead and tell you.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I'm interested.
What it said is that it's a reflection of the earth, that the moon was a perfect mirror. Now, it doesn't hold up if you think about it too deeply, but I had to admit to some degree of sympathy once I heard that, because if you think what you're seeing is kind of a picture of the earth back, you would say, well, okay, maybe that's land masses and oceans or something. So it made me more sympathetic.
Yeah. Well, we like to think of the moon reflecting the Son. So it's understandable.
All right, but as I was beginning to dial the phone, you guys got into the talk about, the snake handling assertions and drinking poison in the Bible, and it just had me thinking about this Facebook meme that goes around. Sorry, it's not meme. I think it's a report that some conservative Christian is claiming Ebola is being brought to America to kill Christians, and I couldn't help but think that, well, if they believe their book, they can drink poison, and it's not going to hurt them.
Well, as we tried to point out, that's the King James translation, and that's an older manuscript. That part and the better manuscripts simply don't have that particular passage. You see, I'm trying to emphasize on what's called textual criticism. You don't have the originals, you have various versions, and they differ somewhat. And so they have to piece together what they think is the better original mark. And that's a conjecture.
Yeah,
sure,
of course.
I understand. I must admit, when I compare passages of different Bibles, the King James Version always sounds better. It sounds somehow confident is one way to say it. But that there's a kind of poetry to it. And I guess I've heard people assert that some people are rooting for it to be, that Shakespeare was one of the people sitting on the committee. But I think that the timeline doesn't allow that the ages aren't right.
Yeah.
All righty.
Okay.
Well,
thank you.
I'll resume listening and learning.
Okay.
Goodbye for now.
Well, he's got a good point. That's good Elizabethan poetry in the King James.
Yes.
And so you have not only the Hebrew poets, but then you have the English poets.
Which restricts your translation, how you're going to express ideas.
Well, it's a good point that the translation itself does have some impact on your understanding of the text. And of course, biblical scholars try to recognize this and try to get the meaning and also the feeling of the poetry of the Hebrew in particular. In that sense, and now you have some kinds of poetry in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians 13 may be a passage that Paul borrowed. It's though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, and on and on. You can see this is like poetry. It has a rhythm of its own. And so what we're saying now is, in textual criticism, there was borrowing of literature, you see, and trying to piece it together. It just didn't drop in out of nowhere. You had lots of people going in, writing this material, and then you had editors and redactors trying to weave it together over the centuries.
Yeah, and if you'd had a translation word for word, that is not a good way to convey the message. All you have to do is listen to some of the computerized translations, and they end up terrible in terms of conveying meaning. And so part of the task of a translator is to get as many of the words in as you can, but get the meaning
and the feeling. Yeah, it's a good point. Really good point. Yeah.
Okay, we have
a
new call coming in. Caller.
Go ahead. We've got the caller.
This is Charles from Central Illinois.
Oh, Charles, how are you today?
Well, so far so good. Not all of the ancient religions had an anthropomorphic version of God.
Go ahead.
In fact, several of them didn't have gods. Like in many of the mainstream concepts of Buddhism.
Theravada Buddhism in particular, yeah, go ahead.
They didn't have a creator God or a supreme divine being. What they had was the real reality versus what we're living in, which is illusion. And the true reality was a state called nirvana. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
But they did anthropomorphize powers and concepts and ideas that were very much like demigods or concepts and ideas that were given physical manifestations. Okay? And as I recall, many of the North American and Amerindian tribes used a concept called the Great Spirit, which was not human in shape and substance.
Hey, go ahead and spell this out a little bit, would you?
It seems as though they conceived of it as a concept that could not be expressed in any kind of true physical form.
Like the word energy, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was intelligent, and it
That's a good point.
So not all of them did have that same kind of anthropomorphic. I'll never get that word out right.
I know. No, most people have a hard time. Anthropomorphic. And you have a good point. As a matter of fact, to be fair to the Hebrews and the Greeks, they had ruach in the Hebrew is wind or breath. And this is close to what you're talking about. And that's translated spirit sometimes.
Yeah, it's cognitive to the term breath. That which lives breathes.
Yeah.
And so spirit is part of the wind, part of the life, part of things of that nature.
So that's closer to energy, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, one of the interesting things I wanted to point out to that very first caller you had, who calls in lots of times with lots of different names. I recognize his voice anywhere.
Okay.
He had, I will want him to know what he thought of Ezekiel. That's the one that was taken into heaven on a pillar of fire while alive. Okay, as I recall. Also, at one point, was Elijah was walking along a road, saw his God, knew him, and sat down and ate lunch with him, or something like that.
Well, you have the in the passage of in Genesis this happening, and then this another passage, and then it went up in a smoke, and just disappeared in smoke, and that was a highly anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
There.
And yet, when Moses was on the mountain, he wasn't allowed to see God's face because no man could see me and live. And yet, Elijah did so.
Well, the Hebrews were wrestling with this. Even to say that no man can see God's face, does that presuppose he has a face? And does that presuppose, does that think of God with a nose and nostrils and earlobes? Or is that just a figure of speech now?
Yeah. So the concepts and the ideas that he's enunciating, especially about the sons of God being the line of Seth.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the where in the Bible he got this concept.
Well, to be fair to Al, who called in on that, Al is in keeping with a very ancient rabbinical tradition on that. He didn't just get that out of nowhere, you see. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. Now, I differ with him on this, but he has some good rabbinical support for his view. Now, there are other rabbis, however, who took a different view, and that view is much more in keeping what Jonas and I were talking about, and thinking that this is part of the polytheistic background that these early Hebrews had to deal with, and they're trying to come to terms with these were Hebrews in the Greek world now, where Alexander the Great conquered the world at that time in the whole Mediterranean area, and everybody had to speak Greek. So they're having to deal with these Greek concepts. and they're gods, and they're trying to reinterpret the Greek world in line with the Hebrew concepts. And
I can understand that. Have you, you know of the Bible on Earth, the book?
No, tell us about it. The Bible on Earth?
On Earth is came out in 2002. I forget the title's name. But it deals with what is actually physically found in Mid-East, that the whole Palestine area, Judea, Israel, so forth, what is physically found by the archaeologists.
Oh, okay. You're not talking about a translation, an archaeological study. Okay, very good, yeah. And
it shows that it's apparently when the first versions of what would become the Tanakh, the Old Testament, was originally compiled around 700 BC. Okay? Because a lot of what they're finding in archaeological digs and so forth isn't matching up with what the Bible is stating.
Right. Well, see, you're bringing up a really interesting point. The Bible was not written in 1 century. It was written over centuries.
And edited and recombined and so forth.
Right. A lot of streams fed into it. After all, you had the rabbinical tradition forming after the Babylonian captivity, which was in 586 BC. And they transported over into Babylon. Then they had to, this is when the priesthood was less important. And then the rabbis began to emerge and then try to piece together their literary tradition, as well as...
That also happened after the Romans leveled Jerusalem, okay, with the loss of Jerusalem and the temple and so forth.
Well, now that's 69 and 70 A.D.
Right.
And
they had to put back together what was going on and why.
Oh, yes.
So there are lots and lots of things that a lot of people really don't know about, the historical circumstances about the Bible.
There's a chaplain in Kentucky who got in touch with us, and he is trying to teach he's also a teacher up there in one of the universities. He's trying to let their students understand the sources that go into these biblical texts, and that's called source criticism. Not just textual criticism, but also source criticism. And I think what he's doing is very commendable.
Yes.
Criticism, not meaning derogatory.
It's like music criticism.
It's like, okay, you're pointing out, no, this didn't happen then because we went and studied the source material and we have conflicting accounts. Especially since, like, several of them demonstrate words in Greek or Aramaic or Hebrew or so forth that weren't used at the time of the supposed incident.
Well, that's why the Hebrews had to translate their own Hebrew tradition into a Greek translation of the Old Testament. That's called the Septuagint, built on the notion that there were 70 scholars in the Septuagint who did the work to do all the translation in Greek, and that took a good long decades to do that. That's all.
I understand that it was finally declared. What we have today is declared true and canonical about 200 A.D. or CE, whichever termination you want.
Yeah, that's when the rabbis were working on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll let you go.
Well, I appreciate your calling in. Two good callers. Thank you.
Okay, Joe. I think it's about time for our
break, huh?
For our break. Let's see. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Community Access Television, Channel 6 or 194, I think, here in Knoxville, depending on your cable network. Tell your out-of-town guests to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
And this is a call-in show, and we like to think we're alive today.
Which date is October 14th.
14th, and so you see on the screen the number you can use to call in while we're having this informative break, and then we're going to have a little break coming up. Sam's
the
going to be in
Knoxville
charge.
area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else? Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Okay, we're back. The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our Tuesday meeting has started, going on right now at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria, just down the street there.
Down the street,
in the old, in Knoxville Old City.
And the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving very lively presentations, discussion topics, and a good roundtable interaction once a month for a book club, too. We need not have read the book, but that will help, but you don't have to have read it to have a good discussion with the people. In fact, we had Pauline Hamilton once to give a good summary of one of the books, and it was exceedingly helpful for the rest of us who hadn't had time to read the book.
Yeah, so join us at Barnes & Noble Booksellers, 8029 Kingston Pike here in Knoxville. And we need to update this. The time has changed. In the past, it was the meeting, it started at 4, but now it starts at 2 p.m. every Sunday. Please let your Ask friends and RET friends know about the time change, because I understand that there were a new couple who, a man and his daughter, who showed up at 4 last time, just as the things were concluding.
I did that once, my first day of a semester teaching at the wrong class, and I gave a lecture to the wrong class, and they forgave me. By the way, one of the books they're thinking of dealing with is The Righteous Mind, and I think I like this title. This is the subtitle: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And in other words, it's a book trying to deal with bridge building.
Actually, that was the March title.
March
and
that's the kind of thing they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay, well, are we ready to get back into our topic yet?
Okay, so both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
And if you do, you're not alone. It shouldn't be. Nobody should be alone unless they want to be. Sometimes a person wants to be alone at least for a while.
I can speak more to the RET meetings than Ask. I've only been to Ask a couple of times. But our typical meetings start at 10:30 at Pellissippi State Technical. I guess it's just community college now, but and go till nominally till 12:30. But usually the discussion is so lively and people are enjoying themselves so much that we have to cut it off at 12:30. So I think it's enjoyable for
both groups have good, lively discussions, and that's good to have in a town like this.
Okay.
Well, are we getting back to our?
Okay, we were discussing. Brought up one point. As Joe was reading, it said, as I recall, that Moses couldn't look at God's face or else he will die. And so I kind of asked the question, well, we have all of this anthropomorphic association between man and God, similar images and so on. And I'm wondering if this wasn't something put in there to kind of separate.
I think you're right. In other words, they have, thou shalt have no engraven images. They could look around and they see in all the cultures, they have God's picture like animals, pictures like themselves. In fact, one of the Greek philosophers said if the Thracians could picture their God, he would have and he described them, and the God looked just like those people. Same color of skin and everything else, and he even said now if other people had their gods, they would look like them. And what the Hebrews were trying to say is, God's got his own face, or they didn't even want to get into that sort of thing.
Well, Joe, we have another call waiting, so
go ahead.
Caller, would you give us your name or nickname, please?
Yes, Doug, and I just wondered what your purpose in life was. What's your goal in life? What do you intend to accomplish in life or have accomplished? And at the end of your life, what do you, where are you going to be? Just dead?
Well, put it this way. I feel lucky that I'm 82.
Well, I understand that. I feel lucky I'm 67, but, the point is, one big reason I have faith is because I don't want to look at the end of life as just being put on the ground or burned up in a crematory. And I feel like I have something to live for and look forward to, and I don't feel like you do. And I'll let you explain that.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If you thought that this was all there was to your life, maybe 90 years, would you now commit suicide or what? That's the end of you. There's not going to be no life afterwards. What would you do?
Well, I wouldn't commit suicide, I don't believe.
Okay.
I have no intention to. I'm just saying that I'm not arguing with you. I just asked you a question. What your purpose in life is.
I'm giving you an answer by showing you that you would go ahead and live your life and try to be as happy as you could and try to help make other people happy too.
Yes, I think that's a good goal.
Okay, and so that's not too difficult to understand. You do it all the time, and that's what I'm doing. Now, what I liked, let me ask you, what do you think you'll be doing 250,000 years from now?
I have no idea.
You don't have any plans at all?
Well, no. If I go to heaven, which I hope I do, I hope there is a heaven, and I end up there, and I hope that, it's a pleasant experience. I'm sure it would be.
Yeah.
My belief tells me it would be a pleasant experience, so I think it would be pleasant.
Okay.
You have other religions that think they're martyrs and they kill themselves and think they're going to have virgins or something. I don't know.
Well, now that's a good point.
Kind of, I don't understand, I understand why I have faith. I don't understand the purpose of life without it.
What is
and I don't want to argue with you. I'm going to hang up.
No. We have some more questions.
You're just making a good, sensible question, that's all. And the answer that I would give, and you can give yours, is that I can't just be resentful that I'm not going to live forever. I'm going to be grateful that I've got a life and that I've had good family and good friends and good health. And I'm not going to be greedy, and I'm not going to demand that I have to have an infinite life just to have a good life here and now. Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a little sense, but the only point is, I mean, my life hasn't been just hunky-dory, you know. I've had challenges. I guess you've had some too. And you know, life's just full of challenges sometimes. But I think when you have faith, it just gives you a sense of, well, something to lean on, something to be there, something to believe in. I just can't understand the fact that you want to be an atheist and believe that there's nothing in the world
Let me ask you this.
to live for except death.
If you were on a jury, okay?
Yes, sir.
Would you vote just to make yourself happy, or would you vote according to what you think is true with the evidence?
Well, I think I would go with the evidence, don't you?
Okay, yeah.
Would you not do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what
I don't know that, you know, that you've got the answer, I've got the answer. I'm just saying it's a free country. You can do what you want to.
I like your attitude.
And at the end of life, you know, if I'm right, and I go to Judgment Day, I'll have to answer for my sins. And if you go to a judgment, you'll have to answer for yours.
Okay, now let me ask you.
And if you don't, then you know, you've got it made.
Well, let me ask you
I don't know that I've got it made.
I like your attitude, mister. Hang in there with us. I like to talk to a man who's got good sense. We always get good people calling in, always. Let me ask you this. Do you think that if a good Buddhist went and died, but did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God, he deserves to be punished forever and ever?
I can't answer that. And I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Because one time I believe a woman came to Jesus in the Bible, and you seem to be pretty well knowledgeable of the Bible, and asked that her child be healed. And he told her that he came to the lost tribe of Israel. And the disciples kind of, you know, were irritated and said, you know, you got to do something here.
Yeah.
And she said even the dogs get the crumbs on the table. He healed her child.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm not God Almighty. I can't answer anything. I can't tell you.
Well, what's interesting about that passage is some of the writers of that time tend to look upon Gentiles as dogs, and that was Jesus in that text using a little twist.
Well, she's the one that said that. Even the dogs get the crumbs on the table.
Yeah. That's I think it's a beautiful passage.
Yeah, and I'm not want to argue with you. I would just. Are you a teacher? Are you a professor?
I used to be a teacher.
Where did you teach at?
I taught at the University of North Texas in California, and I taught at Carson Newman 1 year. And
Carson Newman?
Yeah, and it was a good job. I enjoyed it. And I had a good conversation in a church recently with a teacher up there at Carson Newman. I went to that church because they were celebrating the 100th year of my former Sunday school teacher, whose picture, by the way, was in the Farragut newspaper when he was a young man throwing a javelin. But he lived to be 100, and I visited him again when he was in his 90s, before he died. And I went there just to celebrate his life. And I had a lot of friends growing up in the Methodist and the Baptist tradition, and learned a lot from them.
Okay, you said something just then, Joe, that prompted my response to the question. All of us long for immortality in some sense. Some think of it as some kind of afterlife after we all clearly die. But there's another sense of immortality that's based on what we do here during our lifetime, based on, well, it might be immortality achieved by our children and their children and so on. So a living immortality, but it can also be an immortality that's based on things that we've done that people remember or continue to remember.
Kind of like a legacy.
Well, that's a good way to put it, Yeah,
we worry about the president's legacy and the governor's legacy and all the politicians' legacy.
So that says...
So, you know, we...
Go ahead.
You know, I mean, I think that there's people of faith that do good, people of non-faith that do good, people of other faiths that do good. I think Christianity. I think a lot of people do good. I basically think it's a good world, even though there are people in jail and prison that's broke the law. But as a majority of people, I think everybody's, you know, pretty much wanting to get along.
Yes. So I then asked the question: if part of your immortality on earth is based on what people remember and think about you and write about you, then would you rather be remembered for the good things that you do or for the bad things? And so there is an incentive to do memorable good things. But caller, I want to ask you a question. The show will be ending pretty soon. Question is, have you watched our show before?
I've just caught it a few times when it's been on, and and I'm, you know, I'm not going to judge you. I have no authority to judge you. You do what you want to do. I don't care.
I like that.
I mean, if there's a judgment, you'll face that, and I will too. But I ain't living no model life either. But you know, that's a good thing I think about grace and my faith, and that I've got a chance, even though I haven't lived a perfect life.
Okay, here, see what you think about this. Let's suppose there is a God, okay? And I'm using the word God in the sense he's certainly decent and as good as any human being I know. Then I'm not going to worry. I'm going to say, well, and like you, I'm going to trust in that deity's decency and goodness, and I think you call that grace, and I will too. But I don't think this deity, if he's halfway decent, is going to say, you got to believe X, Y, and Z before you can make it, otherwise to hell with you. I don't think there's going to be that kind of deity.
Well, I don't know. I can't explain that. I wished I could. I wished I was a scholar or something, but I'm just an old ignorant country boy.
Well, put it this way. I was taught by people.
You know, I'm not a scholar. I've been to church, and you know, and I've done some good things. I've done some things I ain't too proud of.
Okay.
But, the point is, I just, there is an incentive to do good. You know, I think everybody has that.
Well, okay, it's time to go. But I was raised by good people like you. I want to say thanks a lot.
And call back again sometime.
I appreciate it. Call back. Good people from here in the mountains.
Okay. Wrong button. It's time to start wrapping things up. If you want to contact us and get out a pen and paper and write down our contact information, which you can do between shows. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Jonas Holdeman.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. Please give us feedback in the voicemail at 865-272-9060.
Or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. You can see this show Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, or see us streaming live to the world at ctvknox.org. Bye all.